$14.7 million in scholarship funds had vanished over 18 months, and 43 students were about to lose their college placements in 72 hours. Nora Alves stared at the email on her phone, the blue light washing over her face in the back of the taxi. The message from the district superintendent had arrived at 6:47 p.m. Emergency audit Monday 9 a.m. Prepare documentation. She hadn't touched those funds. She'd only flagged discrepancies 3 weeks ago. Discrepancies no one wanted to hear about. Now her name sat at the top of the investigation list, and tonight she was expected to smile at Manhattan's wealthiest donors, as if her career wasn't circling the drain. The Plaza Hotel ballroom glittered like a jewelry box tipped on its side. Crystal chandeliers scattered light across marble floors, and the air smelled of gardenias and expensive cologne. Women in silk and men in tailored black moved through the space with the ease of people who belonged. Nora pulled her wrap tighter around her shoulders. Her dress, a simple navy sheath she'd borrowed from her sister, felt suddenly too plain, too honest. She was here because the school district required a representative at the annual Education Excellence Gala, and her principal had pointed at her that morning. You go, network, smile. Don't mention the audit. Her objective was simple: survive 3 hours, avoid attention, get home. The seating app on her phone buzzed. Table 7, seat B. She wove through the crowd, found the table near the stage, and settled into her chair. A minute later, a tall man in a charcoal suit approached from the opposite direction, glanced at his phone, and frowned at the place card. This is table 7, seat B. His voice carried the low, controlled tone of someone used to being correct. Nora held up her phone. According to the app, yes. Maybe there's a duplicate assignment? Before he could respond, a woman with a camera and press badge materialized beside them. Mr. Vale, one quick photo. Ethan Vale. The name landed like a stone in water. Media-shy tech investor, venture capital legend, the man whose foundation funded half the scholarships in the tri-state area. And he was supposed to be sitting in her chair. The photographer raised her camera. Ethan's jaw tightened. He leaned close, his breath warm against Nora's ear. Hold my arm. Pretend we planned this. That woman writes tabloid gossip, and if she thinks I'm approachable tonight, my evening is over. Nora's hand found his elbow. The photographer's flash went off twice before Ethan smiled tightly and said, "We're not taking questions." The woman retreated, scribbling notes. Nora's pulse hammered in her throat. She'd just posed as the date of a billionaire, and someone had taken a photo. Ethan waited until the photographer disappeared into the crowd, then pulled out the chair beside Nora instead of taking hers. "I apologize for dragging you into that. The app must have glitched. My assistant set my profile to anonymous attendance, but somehow it linked my badge to this table." He extended his hand. Ethan Vale. His grip was firm, professional. Nora Alves. I work for the district, school counselor. She tried to keep her voice level. If this causes a problem. It won't, Ethan interrupted. But that photographer will publish something by midnight. And if we're going to avoid a mess, we need a story. One evening, mutual convenience, nothing complicated. He leaned back, his expression unreadable. I'll stay at this table instead of moving. You avoid whoever you're avoiding. I avoid being ambushed for donations all night. Partner presence policy PR 12. 3 applies. No press interviews, no photos without mutual consent. Privacy respected. If either of us wants out, the phrase is, I need some air. Clean exit, no questions. Nora studied him. His face was all angles and control, but his eyes held something else, exhaustion maybe, or wariness. She thought of the superintendent's email, the audit, the dozens of ways tonight could go wrong. One evening. No expectations beyond that. Ethan nodded. Agreed. The servers began placing salads on the table. 20 minutes later, a man in a burgundy blazer appeared at Nora's shoulder. Gerald Tinsley, VP of Donor Relations for the Foundation. She recognized him from district meetings. He always wore that blazer, always carried a gold pen in his breast pocket that he clicked when he talked. Ms. Alves, he said, his smile wide and empty. I didn't expect to see you here. Are we? Addressing any concerns tonight? The question hung in the air like smoke. Nora felt her throat tighten. Before she could answer, Ethan set down his fork. Ms. Alves is here as my guest, Gerald. She's been invaluable in connecting our scholarship recipients with the right academic pathways. In fact, I'd like to discuss expanding her role in our next funding cycle. Tinsley's smile flickered. Of course. Always a pleasure. He retreated, clicking his pen twice. Nora exhaled slowly. You didn't have to do that. Ethan cut into his salmon. He was circling. People like Gerald don't ask questions unless they already think they know the answer. Nora glanced across the ballroom. Tinsley stood near the bar, watching them, still clicking that gold pen. Something in his expression didn't match his smile. She filed the image away and turned back to her plate, but the food had lost its taste. During the speeches, Nora's phone buzzed. A text from her principal. Foundation listed you as under review, compliance. Explain. Her stomach dropped. She hadn't been under review yesterday. Ethan noticed her face. Problem? She showed him the screen. He frowned, pulled out his own phone and typed rapidly. That's not an official designation. Someone manually flagged your file in the donor database, probably within the last 2 hours. Who has that access? About 6 people. Gerald's one of them. Nora's hands went cold. Why would he flag me? Good question. Ethan's eyes narrowed. He made a call, spoke quietly for 30 seconds, then hung up. My assistant's pulling your file activity log. We'll know who accessed it and when. The MC introduced the next speaker, and applause filled the room. Nora barely heard it. Her fingers found the small silver compass pendant she always wore, her grandmother's, engraved with the words True North on the back. She pressed her thumb against the metal, grounding herself. Across the room, Gerald Tinsley raised his glass in their direction, clicked his pen 3 times, and smiled. Ethan saw it too. He's baiting us. After dinner, the crowd shifted to the atrium for cocktails and networking. Nora stayed close to Ethan, her social battery draining fast. A woman in a red gown approached. Board member, Nora remembered. Someone high up in the foundation. Ethan, darling, introduce me to your companion. Ethan made the introduction smoothly. The woman, Caroline, asked about Nora's work. Nora described her counseling programs, the students she'd helped place in colleges, the scholarship coordination. Caroline listened, nodding, and then said, And you manage the fund distributions, don't you? The question was casual, but Nora's instincts prickled. I coordinate applications and placements. The financial distributions go through the Foundation's finance team, Gerald's department. Interesting, Caroline said, because the audit request we received yesterday listed you as the primary point of contact for fund transfers. Nora's heart stopped. That's incorrect. I've never had access to the accounts. Caroline's smile thinned. Perhaps you should clarify that with Gerald. She drifted away. Ethan's jaw tightened. He pulled Nora toward a quieter corner near the windows. The city glittered below them, indifferent. Someone's setting you up, he said quietly, and they're doing it publicly in front of witnesses who'll remember. Nora touched her compass pendant again. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook. If I'm being framed, there has to be a paper trail. Records. Something that proves I didn't authorize those transfers. Ethan met her eyes. Then we find it. Tonight. Across the atrium, Gerald Tinsley watched them, his gold pen glinting in the light. He clicked it once, twice, 3 times, then slipped it back into his pocket and disappeared into the crowd. Ethan led Nora to a service corridor behind the kitchen, empty, quiet, the only sound the muffled thrum of the gala beyond the walls. He pulled up his phone and showed her a screen full of access logs. Your file was opened 6 times tonight, 4 times by Gerald Tinsley, starting at 7:14 p.m. He added the under review flag at 7:52. Nora leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. Why? What does he gain? Ethan scrolled further. 3 weeks ago, you flagged discrepancies in scholarship disbursements. Gerald responded with a memo dismissing your concerns, said you'd misunderstood the reimbursement timeline. He looked up. But you were right, weren't you? Nora nodded slowly. The numbers didn't match. Vendor invoices for student support services, tutoring, exam prep, college consulting. But when I called the students to confirm, half of them had never received any services. The money went somewhere else. How much? $14.7 million over 18 months. Ethan's expression darkened. That's not a mistake. That's systematic. Nora's hands were shaking now. She pressed them flat against the wall. I have copies of the invoices. I printed them before I sent my report. They're in my apartment. Physical documents, dates, vendor names, amounts. Ethan met her eyes. That's evidence. If Gerald knows you have them, you're a threat. The corridor felt suddenly smaller, the air heavier. Nora's voice dropped to a whisper. My grandmother gave me this compass when I graduated college. She said, when you don't know which way to go, remember true north. Do what's right, even when it's hard. She touched the pendant. I thought flagging the discrepancies was the right thing. Now I'm the one under investigation. Ethan's voice was steady, certain. Then we prove you were right, and we make sure Gerald answers for what he's done. They returned to the gala separately. Ethan through the main entrance, Nora through the side door near the coat check. The crowd had thinned slightly, and the bar was busier. Nora ordered water and tried to collect herself. Ethan reappeared at her side 5 minutes later, his face carefully neutral. I just spoke with our foundation's audit team. They have no record of requesting an investigation into your conduct. The email you received, it didn't come from the superintendent. It came from an address that looks similar, but the domain is slightly different. Someone spoofed it. Nora's vision blurred at the edges. So there's no real audit? Not yet, but if Gerald's trying to force one by creating a paper trail of suspicion, it won't take long. Ethan handed her his phone. On the screen was a scanned image, a vendor invoice dated March 15, 2024, for $400, payable to Apex Educational Consulting, LLC. The signature at the bottom, Gerald Tinsley. The timestamp in the corner, 11:47:22 a.m. My assistant pulled this from the Foundation's archived records. It's one of the invoices you flagged. Nora zoomed in. The vendor address was a P.O. box in Delaware. No phone number, no website. This company doesn't exist, does it? Not as a registered entity. But the payments went through. Someone received that money. Ethan's voice dropped. And I think I know who. He nodded toward the atrium. A server was clearing glasses near the stage. Young woman, early 20s, wearing the standard black uniform. Ethan approached her, spoke briefly, and returned with a business card. Her name's Maya Torres. She's worked catering for the Foundation's events for 3 years. She remembers Gerald always requesting the same photographer for these galas, the one who tried to ambush us earlier. Maya says the photographer gets paid separately, off the books, and Gerald handles the invoices personally. Nora's pulse quickened. So the photographer's documenting something, evidence of attendance maybe, proof that people were here when money changed hands, or proof that they weren't. Ethan's eyes were hard now, focused. If Gerald's laundering scholarship funds, he needs a way to make the disbursements look legitimate. Fake vendors, fake services, and photos that create alibis or justify expenses. Nora thought of the compass pendant, the weight of it against her collarbone. True north. Do what's right. We need to find the real records, the ones that show where the money actually went. At 10:15 p.m., Ethan's assistant sent an encrypted file to his phone. Nora and Ethan stood in a corner near the emergency exit, away from the crowd, and opened it together. Inside, a spreadsheet linking vendor invoices to bank transfers. Each entry included a timestamp, a hash code, and a corresponding photo file. Ethan pulled up the first photo, an image of a student ID card, date stamped February 8, 2024, 14/22, 19:05. The EXIF data was intact. This was taken with Gerald's phone, Ethan said quietly. The device signature matches his registered equipment. Nora scrolled through the spreadsheet. 17 invoices, 17 photos, 17 transfers totaling $14.7 million, and beside each entry, a keycard access log. Foundation office, door 3B, swipe ID, yard GT 7841. Gerald's ID. Nora's breath caught. He documented everything. Why would he document everything? Because he thought he was untouchable, Ethan said, and because he needed proof for whoever's on the other end of these transfers. The next file was a PDF, a chain of custody form, labeled Evidence Archive, Form EDU Audit 217B. The form listed each invoice, each photo, each timestamp. At the bottom, a signature, Gerald Tinsley, and beneath it, a second signature, Marcus Hale, Director of Compliance. Nora's hands went cold. Marcus Hale signed off on this. That means compliance knew. That means it goes higher than Gerald. Ethan's voice was tight. Nora felt the walls closing in. She thought of the fake audit email, the public flagging, the way Gerald had smiled at her tonight. She thought of the words, "I need some air," the escape hatch Ethan had offered hours ago. Her mouth opened. The phrase hovered on her tongue. But then she looked at the spreadsheet again, at the 17 students whose scholarships had been stolen, and she swallowed the words. We have the invoices. We have the photos. We have the keycard logs. Her voice was steady now, almost calm. If compliance is dirty, who do we take this to? Ethan didn't answer immediately. Then his phone buzzed. A new message from his assistant. District Attorney's Office confirmed receipt of anonymous tip RE Foundation Scholarship Fraud. Requesting documentation by Monday 9 a.m. Case number 2024 EDU 1147. Nora stared at the screen. Someone already tipped off the DA. Who? Ethan's jaw tightened. I did. 2 hours ago, Sunday morning, Nora's phone lit up with a calendar notification. Meeting. Staff conduct Monday 10 a.m. Superintendent's Office. Agenda. Policy on media engagement and external communications. The email had arrived at 6:43 a.m. No context, no explanation. Just the meeting invite and a single line. Your attendance is mandatory. Nora sat on her couch, still in her pajamas, staring at the screen. The gala felt like a fever dream now. The plaza ballroom, the glittering crowd, Ethan's quiet intensity. She'd spent all of Saturday reviewing the invoices she'd printed weeks ago, matching them against the files Ethan's assistant had sent. Everything aligned. The fraud was real. The evidence was solid. And yet she was the one being called into the superintendent's office. Her phone buzzed again, a text from her principal. FYI, district received complaint from Foundation RE. Unauthorized use of confidential donor information. Legal is involved. Don't discuss case before Monday. Nora's stomach turned. Unauthorized use. That's how they were framing it. She'd flagged fraud, and now she was the one under investigation for accessing records she was supposed to monitor. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't destroying her career. She thought of her students. 43 kids whose college placements hung in the balance, who trusted her to advocate for them. She thought of her grandmother's compass, true north, the idea that doing the right thing mattered. And she thought of the question she'd been avoiding since Friday night. What if doing the right thing wasn't enough? Monday morning, 8:47 a.m. Nora arrived at her office early, unlocked her filing cabinet, and pulled out the folder she'd been protecting for 3 weeks. 17 printed invoices, each one annotated with her handwritten notes, dates cross-referenced with student meetings, vendor addresses checked against state business registries, payment amounts highlighted. Physical evidence, untouched by digital manipulation. She photographed each page with her phone, noting the timestamps, 08:52:14:05 or 08:53:41:5 or 08:54:7:5 or each image captured not just the invoice but her compass pendant lying beside it on the desk. A deliberate choice, a way to prove continuity. At 9:12 a.m. she walked to the main office. The secretary, Mrs. Chen, looked up from her computer. Nora, you're early. I need to confirm something, Nora said. Do you have the sign-in logs from the night I worked late, March 18th? Mrs. Chen pulled up the digital ledger. You badged in at 6:42 p.m. and out at 10:17 p.m. She turned the screen so Nora could see. There, her ID photo, the timestamps, the door access code. Can you print that for me? Mrs. Chen frowned but complied. The printer hummed, spat out the page. Nora took it, thanked her, and returned to her office. At 9:30 a.m., Ethan called. The DA's office confirmed they're opening a formal investigation. They want to interview you this week. Wednesday, 2 p.m. Assistant District Attorney Sarah Kwan will be lead. Will they have the evidence? Nora asked. They will. My assistant submitted the full package this morning. Invoices, bank transfers, photos with EXEF data intact, keycard logs, chain of custody forms, hash codes for every digital file. Form EDU Audit 217B is now part of the official record. Case file 2024 EDU 1147. Ethan paused. And I included something else. Security footage from the gala. Footage of what? You and me, table 7, 7:52 p.m. Gerald approaching. The timestamp matches exactly when he flagged your file in the donor database. The footage shows him on his phone at the table, and the CCTV still captures your compass pendant clearly. It's proof you were with me in public when he was actively trying to incriminate you. Nora closed her eyes. The pieces were falling into place. Physical documents, neutral witness testimony from Mrs. Chen and Maya Torres, and now external validation from the DA's office and Foundation Security Policy, EDU Compliance 08, which required all financial flagging to be reviewed by independent audit before disciplinary action. Gerald had violated that policy when he flagged Nora's file without review. What happens now? Nora asked. Now, Ethan said, you walk into that meeting at 10 a.m. and you tell the truth. The superintendent's office was smaller than Nora had imagined. Wood paneling, a heavy desk, 4 chairs arranged in a semicircle. Superintendent Torres sat behind the desk. Gerald Tinsley sat to her right, his gold pen resting on the armrest of his chair. Nora's principal, Dr. Okafor, sat to the left, and in the corner, almost hidden, was a man Nora didn't recognize. Marcus Hale, Director of Compliance, the second signature on the chain of custody form. Nora sat down, her folder in her lap. Superintendent Torres began without preamble. Ms. Alves, we've received a formal complaint from the Foundation regarding your handling of confidential donor records. Mr. Tinsley has provided documentation suggesting you accessed restricted files without authorization and shared information externally. This constitutes a violation of District Policy HR Conduct 14. Nora kept her voice steady. I accessed files I was authorized to access as part of my role coordinating scholarship applications. I flagged discrepancies I observed in the disbursement records, as required by my job description. Gerald leaned forward, clicking his pen once. The discrepancies you flagged were explained in my memo dated October 3rd. You chose to disregard that explanation and pursue an external inquiry. Because your explanation didn't match the facts, Nora said. She opened her folder, pulled out the first invoice. This is a payment to Apex Educational Consulting LLC, dated March 15, 2024 for $87,400. I called 12 students who were supposedly served by this vendor. None of them had ever heard of Apex. The company doesn't exist as a registered entity in any state database. Gerald's smile didn't waver. Apex operates under a parent company. The students may not recognize the subsidiary name. Nora placed a second document on the desk, the sign-in log from Mrs. Chen. On March 18th, I worked late reviewing these invoices. I was in my office from 6:42 p.m. to 10:17 p.m., as confirmed by keycard access. During that time, I cross-referenced vendor addresses, payment amounts, and student records. She looked at Gerald. During that same evening, your keycard was used to access the Foundation office, door 3B, 7 times. Each access corresponds to a timestamp on a bank transfer. The final transfer, $91,200, was authorized at 9:54 p.m. Gerald's pen stopped clicking. Marcus Hale shifted in his chair. Superintendent Torres frowned. How do you know this? because the district attorney's office subpoenaed the foundation's access logs as part of a fraud investigation opened Friday night. Case number 2024 EDU 1147. Nora placed the printed email from ADA Sarah Kwan on the desk. The investigation includes 17 invoices, 17 fraudulent vendor payments, and $14.7 million in stolen scholarship funds. The room went silent. Gerald's face had gone pale. Marcus Hale stood abruptly. "This is inappropriate. Ms. Alves has no authority to—" "She has every authority," Ethan said from the doorway. Nora turned. Ethan stepped into the room, followed by a woman in a gray suit. ADA Sarah Kwan. "Mr. Vale," Superintendent Torres said, standing. "This is a closed meeting." "Not anymore." Ethan handed a document to Torres. "This is a warrant authorizing seizure of Foundation financial records related to scholarship disbursements. It was signed by Judge Melissa Reeves this morning at 8:30 a.m. He turned to Gerald. "Your access logs, your phone records, and your personal bank statements are now part of an active criminal investigation." Ada Kwan stepped forward. "Mr. Tinsley, Mr. Hale, you're both required to appear for questioning Friday at 5 p.m. Failure to comply will result in a bench warrant." She placed 2 subpoenas on the desk. Gerald's hand trembled as he reached for his pen. It slipped from his fingers, clattered to the floor. Nora bent down, picked it up. The gold casing was engraved. GT, for service to education. She turned it over. A small seam along the barrel, almost invisible. She twisted it gently. The pen opened. Inside, a micro SD card. Nora held it up. "This pen, you've carried it to every meeting, every gala, every event. You clicked it when you were nervous, when you were planning something." She handed the pen to Ada Kwan. "I think you'll find it contains copies of the original invoices before they were altered." Kwan slipped the pen into an evidence bag, labeled it, and noted the chain of custody on her tablet. Gerald said nothing. Marcus Hale stood frozen. Superintendent Torres looked between them, her expression unreadable. Finally, she spoke. "Ms. Alves, you're dismissed from this meeting. Dr. Okafor, please ensure Ms. Alves receives a formal apology and a commendation for her integrity. Mr. Tinsley, Mr. Hale, you're suspended pending the outcome of the investigation. Security will escort you out." As Nora stood to leave, she glanced back. Gerald was still staring at the evidence bag, at the pen he'd carried for years, the pen that had just betrayed him. 3 weeks later, Nora stood in her office packing the last of her files, not because she was leaving, because she'd been promoted. Student Advocacy Coordinator. Her new title read, "More resources, more authority, more ability to protect kids who needed it." The 43 students whose scholarships had been frozen were cleared to enroll. The foundation had restored the funds, issued public apologies, and implemented new oversight policies. Gerald Tinsley and Marcus Hale were awaiting trial. The charges: wire fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy. The evidence from the micro SD card had been devastating. Emails, payment schedules, offshore account numbers, everything Nora had suspected, and more. A knock at her door. Ethan stood in the hallway holding a small wrapped box. "Thought I'd stop by before your first day in the new role." Nora smiled. "You didn't have to. I wanted to." He handed her the box. Inside, a silver keychain, a tiny compass, almost identical to her pendant. "So you always know true north," Ethan said quietly, "even when the path isn't clear." Nora felt her throat tighten. She looked up at him, this man who'd stood beside her when everything was falling apart, who'd used his resources and his influence to make sure the truth came out. "Thank you," she said, "for believing me." "You made it easy," Ethan replied. "You had the courage to speak up when no one else would." They stood there for a moment, the office quiet around them. Then Ethan smiled, a real smile, not the careful mask he'd worn at the gala. "Dinner sometime? No glitches, no fake dating, just us." Nora nodded. "I'd like that." As he left, Nora turned back to her desk. She pinned the keychain to her bag, beside her grandmother's compass. Two reminders now, two anchors, because the truth mattered, because doing the right thing, even when it was hard, even when it cost you something, was the only way to live. And because sometimes, when you stand up for what's right, you don't stand alone. How many of us would risk our careers to protect people we've never met? If this gave you courage, subscribe and tell us. What would you have done?